Hi, welcome to Candid Chats on Cancer. I'm Mary Robinson.
I'm Jamie Moore. Today, this is going to be really interesting.
Yes, it is.
We're going to talk about genetics.
Yeah, Brandy Preston's here with us today, and she's from Hereditary Cancer Foundation, and we're super excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure. What got you interested in doing this anyway?
So my mom had breast cancer at the age of 35. She had a second primary cancer at the age of 38. And then 3 days before she passed away, she asked my brother, my sister, and we all promised her that we would have our testing done and we would be proactive with her health rather than reactive. So unfortunately, she passed away at the age of 40. I was 14, my brother was 13, and my sister was 9 years old. So we kind of took that promise one step further and created the nonprofit. So we pay for genetic testing whenever it's denied by insurance, Medicare and Medicaid, or if people have a high deductible where they can't afford the testing for any reason. We help people access that information. So 10 to 15% of all cancers are hereditary. So I look at that like 15% of cancers that we have the opportunity to detect really early or prevent altogether. And so it's just kind of a way of paying it forward with the information that my mom gave me and my brother and sister, and kind of helping others access that as well.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and thank you for fulfilling your mom's dream for you too.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit more about hereditary genetics. You know, what is hereditary genetics with cancer?
Yeah, so it's mutations that are passed on from parents to children. So in my family's case, we have a BRCA1 mutation. So a lot of people might recognize that from Angelina Jolie, right?
Right.
So for me, that meant I had an 87% lifetime risk of breast cancer and a 63% lifetime risk of ovarian cancer, elevated risk of pancreatic cancer and melanoma as well. My brother, male breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer.
Right.
And so for me, what is so enlightening about that is because my mom had breast cancer, I would have been so focused on my breast screening, right? I probably would have been on top of getting my mammogram at 40. With that test result, I was able to have a baseline mammogram, but then a breast MRI once a year, which is a better screening for somebody that's high risk like me. I also qualified for preventative surgeries. So I had a preventative mastectomy when I was 22, which took my risk from 87% to somewhere between 2 and 5%. So I probably have the lowest, I probably have a lower breast cancer risk than you do.
Yeah.
And I'm the high risk person, you know, so that's pretty powerful too.
Did you do anything with the cervical part of it?
So I'm at risk for ovarian cancer. So the guidelines right now will say to remove your ovaries at the age of 35 for a BRCA1 carrier, age 40 for BRCA2. Different mutations have different cancer risk. So for me right now, I do a transvaginal ultrasound and CA-125 every 6 months. There really is no good screening or detection for ovarian cancer, so really that preventative surgery at 35 or the completion of childbearing is really, really important.
Have you had children?
So I have a 6-year-old little boy, Peyton. So he'll have a 50-50 chance of also carrying the mutation as well. Which, you know, is scary as a parent to think about, but it's so empowering to know that medicine, the way it's progressing, I think there'll be a lot of option and a lot of hope for him in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do you have plans on doing anything surgically, or are you done having children?
I don't know yet.
Because that would be a tough decision as a woman. It really would.
It would be.
Yeah.
You know, and we're finding out some different things too with ovarian cancer. We had somebody on a little while ago that was quoting research that the ovarian cancer actually starts in the fallopian tube.
Yeah, so one of the options here, and there's some gynocs that are participating in this research where you can remove the fallopian tubes at 35 and then go through natural menopause and then remove the ovaries. And they've seen a lot of success with that. So I'm 28 now. I have a couple years before I have to make that decision. And I'm definitely keeping an eye on those studies because that sounds a whole lot better.
Than having everything removed,
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend that says we all go through menopause. Those of us that do the preventative surgery, we just get to choose the time and the date, and then we join the Little White Dress Club, and we can wear a white dress whenever we want to. So there's
I'm in that club now, but mine's from the chemo, chemo related.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm all about finding the silver linings when you can, you know?
Yeah.
Talk about silver linings. Tell us more about the foundation. You know, because that sounds pretty impressive that you guys pay for people that can't afford to get genetic testing done.
Yep. So insurance guidelines have really improved. So we started the nonprofit 4 years ago, and at the time it was really difficult to get insurance to cover. Insurance is getting a lot better. I would say the majority of women who meet certain criteria, if you're unaffected, if you have not had cancer, you're usually covered under the Affordable Care Act. If you have 3 or more relatives with cancer, or a breast cancer in the family diagnosed under the age of 50, or a pancreatic or an ovarian in the family, you shouldn't have any trouble getting it covered. It's the men. Men aren't covered under the Affordable Care Act for preventative care.
Really?
So they're subject to their deductible, which now in high deductible plans, this test can cost as much as $6,000. And so
Right.
if you have a deductible of $5,000, you're going to be paying that. And I know for my mom, it costs $6,000 out of pocket. And a lot of people might think that that's a lot, but I think of how much that $6,000 has helped me and my family. And so we just want to be able to make sure that anyone who, if that's a barrier, that we can alleviate that barrier and
Right.
help give them the information that can save their life or the life of their family. Because that cancer treatment's going to cost a whole lot more than $6,000.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. So how do you get the word out? I've never heard of you before, so I
Yeah.
was just
Yeah,
wondering.
what is the name of your foundation?
Hereditary Cancer Foundation, so it's just hereditarycancer.org.
Okay.
We're on Facebook and obviously our website, but really it's word of mouth.
Okay.
We work with a lot of oncologists and OBGYNs and primary care providers to help identify people in their clinics. For me, I want the provider to be active in this, because regardless of those test results, there's going to be alterations to medical
Right.
management. So if you come back positive, whether that's screening or preventative surgeries, but a lot of times people will come back negative,
Right.
but based on that family history, you don't go back to general population screening. You might have altered medical management based on that alone. So for example, if your mom was diagnosed with breast cancer at 40, you don't start your mammograms at 40, you start
Right.
no later than age 30. If you're positive for a gene mutation, you can start as early as 18 or 19 with some of that screening.
So early detection is the biggest thing about what you're doing.
Yep.
So instead of waiting to get breast cancer at 35, you can get screened at 18 and find out what your possibilities are.
Yep, exactly.
And that screening, is that a blood test? Or what is that screening that you help perform for?
So the hereditary cancer test itself is blood or saliva. So it's
Okay.
pretty easy. Different labs offer different tests. Right now, it's usually a panel of 35 or more genes, looking for 8 different kinds of cancer. So we're looking for breast, ovarian, prostate, pancreatic, gastric, colon, endometrial, and melanoma.
Right.
So if you have any of those cancers in your family, that's the kind of screening test we'll look for those different cancers and assess risk for that.
So in other words, if you found somebody that had like melanoma in their genetics, okay, well now you should wear SPF 45 instead of SPF
Don't
10.
go into tanning booths
Don't go to
and
yeah.
maybe
Right.
wear a sun hat.
Right. But we see a lot of these different cancers will run together in families. So like pancreatic cancer and
Right.
melanoma run together very commonly. So if you have a lot of melanoma in your family, you might not be thinking about your pancreas, right? And we can do screening.
Yeah.
We can screen for the pancreas. I mean, it's not the best screening tool, but something's better than nothing, because in
Right.
the general population, are we ever looking at a patient's pancreas? No. And a lot of times pancreatic cancer is misdiagnosed as diabetes, or they'll do all these other screenings first before they look at that pancreas. If you know that you're at risk for pancreatic cancer, it just helps ensure that we can get to the pancreas one
Right.
step quicker, rather than going through all these other tests.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So if you've had a cancer like I've had leukemia, would I be able to go through your organization, or is that something that wouldn't be a candidate because it's not one of the 8?
Yep. So leukemia right now is not part of that 8. So insurance guidelines aren't really covering. But if you had other cancers in your family, all cancer is genetic, right? So when we're born
Right.
with a gene mutation, it just makes us that much more likely to inherit, to develop a cancer. So it's not to say that it's not hereditary, it's just not one that we're actively looking for right now. But I would definitely look at any other cancer in your family, and if you have any of those other cancers, especially those that are diagnosed at young ages, or rare cancers like the ovarians and the pancreatics, or young breast cancer, triple negative breast cancer, those kind of things, it definitely could be affiliated.
Well, and it's important to note too, and I'm sure we've said this on another show, that men really have to watch out for breast cancer
Yes,
too,
there's
just
no
like
doubt about
women. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, well, talking about men, you know, it's kind of sad to hear that men don't qualify for this type of testing. Because what if you have, like, you know, both sides of the family have colorectal cancer?
Yep.
Can
So these mutations can come from your mother or your father's side. So like my mom inherited her BRCA mutation from my grandfather.
Okay.
My grandfather is one of 5 boys, and 4 of those 5 boys are carriers, and they all have daughters. So I mean, and the sons too. But it wasn't until my mom had a breast cancer at 35 that any red flags were really raised.
Right.
And men, I mean, they might qualify for the testing. They're just not covered at zero out of pocket. They're
Okay.
just subject to their deductible. But still, with a high deductible plan, if you say, oh, this test could cost you, $6,000 or $1,800, sometimes they'll say no, thank you. And that's my whole mission is please don't say no, thank you, because
Right.
if somebody would have identified my grandpa, my mom might not have had to go through what she had to go through. And my son is at risk too,
Right.
so it definitely impacts him as well.
And that's important to note too, that, your mom, that was several years ago, and think of the technology and the advancements we've made since
Right.
then. So
Leaps and bounds.
now
for
you've
sure.
talked about yourself and your brother, but what about your younger sister? Is she in the clear?
Yeah, so my sister hasn't been tested yet.
Oh, okay.
It's so frustrating. I always joke, she's more worried about who's taking her on a date this weekend.
Well, she's young. I remember
she's-
those days.
She's 23. She's a nurse, but she's being managed as if she's a positive. So she's having
Right.
all of those screenings and stuff
Well,
as
and
if she's
maybe-
positive until she knows differently.
Maybe she doesn't want to know.
Yeah.
If she's at least being managed like that, then that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. As long as she's being
Yeah.
screened, and if something were to come up, then she wouldn't have to worry about it. But I tell her, I'm like, you might not need all these screenings. If she were to be negative, she goes back to general population risk. So we're
Right.
screening her right now, like she has an 87% risk. But if she's negative, she goes back to that 12% risk, and she doesn't need a mammogram until she's 40, which is
Okay,
pretty
so-
significant.
So with risk, okay. So let's say one side of the family has colorectal cancer and the other side of the family has no history of it whatsoever, and their genetics, mom's clean, but dad has colorectal cancer. What is the opportunity in your mind for the siblings or the children of those parents to have that genetic mutation?
Yeah. Well, it can come from either side. So, I think for the kids, what's so important is you test them based on that family history,
Okay.
right? But what's interesting is research is showing 50% of gene carriers have no family history. So until my mom was diagnosed, on my grandpa's side, we really didn't have that much cancer. And then now in recent years, there's been a lot of skin cancer and that kind of stuff. But until my mom, it really didn't display itself. Well, a lot of it's because the men are carriers at the
Right.
same rate that women are. But you don't have, as a male, you don't have an 87% risk of breast cancer.
Right.
It's, 1%. So your risk of developing breast cancer with a BRCA mutation, although higher than the general population, is still not 87. So a lot of times the men will carry these mutations and never develop a cancer.
Right.
That makes sense too.
It really does. It's kind of like with uterine cancer. If you have the genetic predisposition to getting uterine cancer, like, my wife is turning something. She's turning 28. Yeah. She's turning 50, and so she's going through menopause. Well, she's just like, rip this thing out. I don't need my uterus anymore. Why should it be there just in case I get cancer? Okay, well, she's never had the genetic screening. So for her to have the genetic screening, so now let's say it comes back positive. Now she can go into her OBGYN and say, look, I have this genetic predisposition to getting uterine cancer. Can I have my
Absolutely.
uterus removed?
Absolutely. Yep, we see that a lot. We'll see women that go in and they have a hysterectomy for abnormal bleeding or something like
Right.
that, and an OBGYN might leave the ovaries. Well, if somebody has a 63% lifetime risk of ovarian cancer, you don't want to leave those ovaries, right?
Right.
With colon cancer, we see colon and uterine cancer linked very commonly with Lynch syndrome. And Dr. Lynch is right in Omaha, right from here.
Right.
But-
Actually, he's CHI, isn't he?
Yep.
He's got a big
At
new
Creighton.
place, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a big one with uterine cancer a lot of times. And colon cancer, that's the thing. If you go and get your colonoscopies and you remove your polyps, you never get colon cancer, right? We can prevent colon cancer. Well, if you leave the uterus in a woman, you know, like that risk is still going to be there. So definitely important to remember with colon cancer and uterine cancer.
We're starting to see this more commercially available too. Like we had a surgeon, GI surgeon here, who recommended Cologuard. Getting early screening with that, you know, that's great.
Yeah,
You know.
Cologuard is awesome. Anything that can improve screening is great. I don't think it's recommended for high-risk patients
No.
like those that have Lynch syndrome, but definitely anything that's going to help improve early detection or help find those cancers so we can treat them at the earliest stages, the better.
What is Lynch syndrome?
So Lynch syndrome, just like BRCA, so BRCA is linked with breast and ovarian cancer. Lynch syndrome is linked with colon and endometrial and ovarian cancer.
Okay.
So it's just another gene mutation. So of like the panel that we're looking at right now of 35 different genes, Lynch syndrome accounts for 5 of those genes. And BRCA, it's BRCA1 and BRCA2, just accounts for 2 of those. So there's a whole other gamut of mutations that we're looking at, but Lynch and BRCA are usually the most well-known just because people have been so active. Angelina Jolie has done so much for the BRCA movement, just raising awareness.
Yeah, I've had a friend who had double mastectomies done because, you know, they did find a lump in one of her breasts, and her mom had had it, and I think her sister had had it, and so they had genetic testing done, and she had both breasts removed. She took a lot of bad publicity about it, you know, that people were saying, well, how dare you remove your healthy breast, because as doctors and nurses and stuff, we're taught not to remove healthy tissue.
Yep.
And so there's a little bit of a moral, or not moral, but ethical thing.
Yeah, you know, and that's a really interesting point because what we see with BRCA, like someone's risk of second primary breast cancer within 5 years is 50 to 60%. So I talk to surgeons all the time and I say, you know, the decision between a mastectomy and a lumpectomy, a woman might be totally comfortable with a lumpectomy until she finds out she has a 50% chance of a second primary in the opposite breast in 5 years. It might dramatically alter what surgery you're going to offer her.
Yeah, or stage 1 turns into stage 3 or stage 4.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I believe that when Angelina Jolie did that,
Yeah.
you know, that was right at the beginning of people even thinking about doing that. So it probably raised a lot of eyebrows then, but it also got people to thinking and aware that maybe we should be doing something different. So,
For sure.
you know,
You know,
It was
if
good
somebody
for-
said, you know, if you can remove this body part and never get cancer in my life, I'm sorry, I'm first in line. You know?
Absolutely.
I don't even care
Take
what body
anything.
part. I'm like first in line for that. You know, it makes perfect sense. But let's talk about like the double breast mastectomy. You know, you're young. How did you feel about, you know, making that decision that you knew genetically you were probably going to get breast cancer somewhere down the line?
Yeah, I mean, with an 87% lifetime risk, I kind of looked at it like I was going to have that surgery at some point in my life. It
Right.
was either early on my terms or later with the side of chemotherapy.
Okay.
And now I look at like a 12% risk. I'm like, 12% risk to go through what my mom went through? Like, no way, I would do the surgery all over
Yeah,
again
right.
just to prevent that. I mean, it was 6 weeks of tough recovery, but I've never looked back, and my cosmetic results, not that that's what matters,
Right.
but I think a lot of young women are afraid that they're going to have like their mom's surgery or their grandma's surgery. I did nipple sparing, my incisions at the bra line. Cosmetically, it looks like an augmentation, right? And the recovery was hard and the expanders were hard. But I don't regret my decision at all. I feel
No.
beautiful and whole, and I think that's an important piece for young women to know, especially.
well, and I think nowadays, don't they do the surgery and the implants at the same time?
A lot of people
Which is
qualify
nice.
for that. Yeah.
Well, and we even had, what was it, tissue sparing? I can't remember the name of the, we've had several women on with breast cancer, and they did the same thing with her. They were able to pretty much keep her breast intact,
Yeah.
which, yeah, 10 years ago, it was an incision across here and an incision across here.
Yeah.
It's
And
beautiful.
3D nipple tattoos are great. I mean, that's another great option for people that can't keep their nipples. But I think as much of a natural breast as you can keep is awesome.
Yeah.
And there's a familiarity there. And so I never felt like a sense of like they're not mine or.
Yeah, just like you had an augmentation done,
Yep.
like
Exactly.
Yep.
a bunch of people at that time were having that done anyway.
Yep.
With the genetics, how appropriate it is to, like, say, like Mary's got young children, to have all of her children tested for cancer?
Yeah, so typically with a lot of these mutations, the onset of cancer is later in adult age, and so ethically,
Right.
most labs won't test children unless there's a risk of childhood cancer. We do see, like leaf Ramini, for example, there's a 22% risk of cancer by the age of 5. And so a lot, with your leaf Raminis, you'll see a lot of leukemias.
Right.
But like with a BRCA mutation, there is no evidence showing that there's an increased risk of childhood cancer. So most labs won't even run it because they want the person themselves to be able
Right.
to make that decision on their own.
So you
So
probably have to be
they have to be
18.
18 or 19
Okay.
typically.
Is there any issues with privacy and genetic testing?
Well, if you go through a commercial laboratory, there shouldn't be. It's treated just the same as like it would be with your personal health information,
Right.
like HIPAA and stuff. But when you get into your 23andMe's or your Ancestry.coms, they can sell your information. So that's something that people should be aware of as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. I haven't gone that route yet.
Me either, and I think I should. It'd be kind of fun to find out. You know, it's.
Well, and another thing, I think it's a good point to make too, that, you know, if you can't have, or that children shouldn't be tested and all that until they're older, because parents would probably have all their children go in just to make sure that they're going to stay healthy. And
Yeah.
that's something that, you know, can really up the insurance rates and whatnot
Right.
for maybe, you know, not even having a reason
Yeah.
to do
So with
that.
like hereditary cancer testing, there was a law passed in 2008 called GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So I can't be discriminated against for my genetic status for health insurance. Now that's different for life insurance or
Right.
disability, but I think that that's a really important point to make so people don't feel like they will be discriminated against. But I think to your point about testing kids, if you find out that your 14-year-old has an 87% lifetime risk of breast cancer, you might be tempted to take them in for a mammogram or a breast MRI when really that screening is not appropriate
Yeah.
at that young of an age unless you have really young onset breast cancers in your family. So I think part of it is a protection too to make sure parents aren't going overboard. But we do see
Yeah,
some
'cause
mutations.
As parents, we have a tendency to go overboard, especially when it's about cancer. But it would be a good thing, like, you know, if you have a 14-year-old daughter, it'd be a good thing to start teaching her early.
Self-breast exams and those kind of things. And I think you
So-
can continue to have those conversations. Like my son Peyton has grown up around this kind of talk, right?
Right.
And so I think when it comes to Peyton's age, like he'll just be like, I'm gonna get tested and that's what we do. And I find out my risk and I manage accordingly. So I think it's a good dialogue to start having. But you don't necessarily have to throw a kid into a screening
Right.
unnecessarily.
But the more people that screen, the bigger the database is, yeah?
Yep, so like as far as hereditary cancer testing, that's something like, which is really important to find a good lab that's done this test for a long period of time because
Right.
they have the data to be able to classify different variants. So like of those 35 genes we're looking for, BRCA1 only accounts for 1 of the 35.
Right.
But there's 1,800 places where a mutation can occur. So if you think about it like the alphabet and letters flip-flopping places, that's what a mutation looks like when you're looking at the DNA. And to have 1,800 places where those letters can rearrange,
Right.
you want to have a lab that has seen those changes and can say that that risk is really significant or it's not. And unfortunately, there's some labs right now that aren't giving the best results.
Right.
So that's definitely a discussion that people need to have with their providers. There is no FDA oversight, so it's a decision that needs to be made carefully.
You know, because what about like negative results? Because, you know, some of these, are the more not reputable companies can say you're negative or you're positive, and now you make a decision upon that.
Yeah, it's scary.
Really
Especially
is.
because insurance is only covering this test one time in your life. So really making sure that you go through a reputable lab the first time
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
is really important.
So,
Not to, play favorites, but what's a lab that you feel can give really pretty accurate results at this time
yeah.
in genetics?
Myriad Genetics, I think everyone would agree they're the industry leader. They had a patent on the BRCA mutations back in the 90s and then went to the Supreme Court in the mid-2000s, and that got overturned, which literally overnight all of these labs came out of the woodwork, which has been a blessing and a curse.
Right.
That's where your lesser known, less reputable labs came into play, but the cost dramatically decreased because it gave
Because of
competition. So it was a blessing and a curse. But I like to say if it's my friends and family, there's one lab that I would go to, and that's Myriad. I think, someday maybe these other labs will catch up. But right now, I don't think that that's the case.
Okay.
how do you raise funds for your foundation? I know you go to different, clinics
Events.
and whatnot,
Yeah.
but
So like we have Omaha Gives coming up. That's a big giving holiday. And just word of mouth, people that we've helped pay for their testing in the past, they might not have been able to afford, $1,000, but they can give $20 or $30 or
Right.
$40 to give back. We do a golf outing every year.
Really?
Yeah.
So
So
what
come
are the
golf.
dates of some of these things?
So Omaha Gives is May 22nd.
Okay.
And
coming up.
our golf outing is usually in August or September. We're just finalizing the date too.
Cool.
So we like to list all of those on our website, so feel free to check it out.
We're going to
that'd be
there.
great.
I would love to go, to the golfing one.
I have a golf
Yeah.
cart. That's about as much as I know.
Hey,
That's
we,
cool.
we can pair up and drive
She
around the
can
golf.
drive.
Fun! Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brandy, for joining us.
Thank you guys so
This
much
has
for having me.
been very informative because I know genetics is something that we're all looking at right now. We're seeing a lot of it on television too. So thank you ever so much for being on our show. And we would love to have you back. And I would love to go out to your golf
Yeah, we'd love
event.
to have you.
We'll have to cover that for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank
You're very
you.
welcome.
And join us again for another Candid Chats on Cancer.
Be well.